The relationship between Ukraine and Russia is complex and deeply intertwined. For centuries, their fates have been intertwined. In the late 19th century, both nations found themselves under the control of the Tsarist regime. This shared experience, however, was marked by stark differences. While Russia dominated the political and economic spheres, Ukraine often found itself relegated to the periphery. The turn of the 20th century saw the rise of Ukrainian national identity. This growing sense of self-awareness, however, was met with resistance from the Russian Empire. Despite these challenges, Ukrainian culture and language continued to flourish, laying the groundwork for future struggles for autonomy. The Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 offered a glimmer of hope for Ukrainian independence. A short-lived period of self-rule followed, marked by the establishment of the Ukrainian People's Republic. This dream, however, was crushed, as Russia was unwilling to let Ukraine go. By 1922, Ukraine was forcefully incorporated into the Soviet Union as the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. This event marked the beginning of a tumultuous period in Ukrainian-Russian relations. It was a period defined by both forced integration and brutal repression. The 1930s brought about one of the darkest chapters in Ukrainian history, the Holodomor. This man-made famine, orchestrated by Stalin's regime, resulted in the deaths of millions of Ukrainians. The Holodomor remains a deeply traumatic event in the Ukrainian psyche, casting a long shadow over relations with Russia. World War II brought further devastation to Ukraine. Caught between the forces of Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, Ukraine became a battleground. The war inflicted immense suffering on the Ukrainian people, leaving behind a landscape scarred by conflict. Despite enduring unimaginable hardship, Ukrainians displayed remarkable resilience. Many fought valiantly against both the Nazis and the Soviets, demonstrating their enduring desire for freedom. However, the end of the war did not bring peace for Ukraine. Instead, it was absorbed back into the Soviet Union. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked a watershed moment for Ukraine. On August 24, 1991, Ukraine declared its independence, finally breaking free from decades of Soviet rule. This newfound independence, however, came with its own set of challenges. Ukraine faced the daunting task of building a new nation from the ground up, all while navigating the complex geopolitical landscape of the post-Soviet world. The relationship with Russia remained particularly fraught. Ukraine's attempts to forge its own path, particularly its pursuit of closer ties with the West, were met with suspicion and hostility from Moscow. Russia's political and economic influence continued to loom large, hindering Ukraine's efforts to fully assert its sovereignty. In 2014, the simmering tensions between Ukraine and Russia reached a boiling point. Following the Euromaidan revolution, which ousted pro-Russian President Viktor Yanukovych, Russia moved swiftly to seize control of the Crimean Peninsula. This illegal annexation, condemned by the international community, sent shockwaves through Ukraine and beyond. The crisis in Crimea was not an isolated incident. In eastern Ukraine, a conflict erupted in the Donbas region. Fueled by Russian propaganda and supported by Russian troops and weaponry, separatist groups launched an armed insurgency against the Ukrainian government. The Donbas War further destabilized the region, claiming thousands of lives and displacing millions. Section 5. Invasion. Russia's full-scale assault on Ukraine. The world watched in horror as Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. This unprovoked and unjustified act of aggression marked a dramatic escalation of the conflict, plunging Ukraine into a nightmare. Russian forces, employing overwhelming military might, bombarded Ukrainian cities, targeting civilian infrastructure and causing widespread destruction. The Ukrainian people, however, responded with extraordinary courage and determination. Ordinary citizens took up arms to defend their homeland, while others sought refuge in neighboring countries. The international community, condemning Russia's actions, rallied to provide Ukraine with humanitarian aid and military support. Section 6, A Tale of Two Nations, Commonalities and Differences. Despite the long and troubled history, Ukraine and Russia share deep-rooted connections. Both nations are bound by centuries of cultural exchange, linguistic similarities, and a shared Orthodox Christian heritage. These commonalities, however, are overshadowed by the deep divisions that have come to define the relationship. Historical grievances, particularly the enduring legacy of the Holodomor, continue to fuel mistrust and resentment. Politically, Ukraine and Russia have diverged significantly. While Ukraine has oriented itself towards the West, seeking integration with the European Union and NATO, Russia remains mired in authoritarianism, clinging to its sphere of influence in the post-Soviet space. Section 7, the US-Ukraine mineral deal, a strategic shift? In May 2025, a new chapter unfolded in the Ukrainian-Russian saga with the signing of a landmark economic partnership between the United States and Ukraine. This deal grants the US preferential access to Ukrainian mineral resources, including lithium and cobalt, crucial components for advanced technologies and renewable energy. While hailed as a mutually beneficial agreement, the deal has further strained relations with Russia. Moscow views the US-Ukraine mineral deal as a strategic setback, perceiving it as a form of economic colonization that undermines Russia's influence in the region. The deal has further fueled tensions between the US and Russia, with Moscow accusing Washington of exploiting the conflict in Ukraine for its own economic gain. Section 8, A World on Edge, International Response and Diplomatic Efforts. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine has reverberated far beyond the borders of the two nations. The war has sent shockwaves through the global economy, disrupted supply chains, and triggered a humanitarian crisis. The international community, grappling with the ramifications of the conflict, has responded with a mix of condemnation, sanctions, and diplomatic initiatives. The United States, along with its NATO allies, has provided Ukraine with billions of dollars in financial and military aid, bolstering Ukraine's defenses and providing humanitarian assistance. Diplomatic efforts to broker a ceasefire and find a peaceful resolution to the conflict have yielded little progress. Russia, defiant in the face of international pressure, shows no signs of relenting in its aggression. Section 9, The Road Ahead, Continued Conflict and Uncertain Futures. As of 2025, the conflict in Ukraine shows no signs of abating. The human cost of the war continues to mount with no end in sight. Millions of Ukrainians remain displaced, their lives shattered by the conflict. The war has had a devastating impact on Ukraine's economy, infrastructure, and cultural heritage. The future remains uncertain. The international community faces the daunting task of holding Russia accountable for its actions, while also seeking to deter further aggression. The outcome of the conflict will have profound implications for the future of Ukraine, Russia, and the broader international order.